Hi, I'm Mark, producer of Roundtable, the TV series born here in New York City at the legendary Manhattan Neighborhood Network Studios. The exchange of ideas is important, and that is why we bring to you the following presentation. Please watch.
Hello, and welcome to Single Shot Show at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Today we're going to be talking about dreams, about how narrative of photograph is created, and what photography means in terms of its content and idea for the viewers, for the art world, and for humanity in general. And to discuss it, we invited Mark Seidenfeld. Hello, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Alex.
Your photography is truly a body of brilliant and beautiful work, which, in my opinion, is full of hope and full of looking into the future, both from technical point of view and in terms of its narrative. And as I understand, the thing that you're most passionate about is specifically what the artwork says to the viewer, right?
I don't think I could have said it better myself. You know, for me, as I saw that millions of people have cameras today, everyone has a camera in their phone. I thought long and hard when I transitioned from analog to digital photography, how could I distinguish myself? And also, how could I develop my own language in this new arena, the digital arena? And what I realized ultimately was what I have and what I'm passionate about is imagination. And I thought, if I unlock my imagination and try to create stories and create reflections and thoughts and dreams that are important to me and realize them visually, then I'm really pushing myself into a place that no one else can be, because it's my imagination, and that's the one thing that distinguishes each of us.
Well, that's precisely what I personally believe photography should be pursuing at this moment. We did a great job over the past 150 years documenting what's actually happening with humanity, both its most glorious moments, its happiest moments, like the famous kiss on Times Square, for example, and the most gruesome moments and the most terrible things that was happening, like photographs of those slaves in Congo or concentration camps. We've seen it all, we've shown it all, we was truthful about it, and in my opinion, we didn't achieve enough. So possibly photography as a form of art would do better if it would actually be showing to humanity what could have been, or what even was completely impossible to happen. Maybe the dream will make the humanity to move in a direction that it needs to go.
Okay, so to unpack a little bit of what you just said, I think that the people, the photographers, both men and women, who have engaged in social commentary, often putting themselves in precarious positions, I am inspired by them all the time.
Absolutely.
I think you know, the work that they do, the quote unquote, the decisive moment, is extraordinary work. But the other part of what you said is, you know, photographers who delve deeper into imagination or dream. Photographers like myself tend to come from a place of inspiration, of reaching for something positive, for dreams, even if what is incorporated in their work is their life experience, and sometimes it's positive and negative. It's amazing how, you know, you sift through your life experiences, and they may not be directly autobiographical in the images that you create, but they're certainly bubbling beneath the surface of the images that you create.
Oh, absolutely. And about positive and negative, wasn't implying at all that our imagery have to only be projecting something positive. Just like an electrical engine, if you have only positive, the engine is dead.
Agreed.
So the only way we can actually create something that is of substance and of meaning is creating balance, and probably even more importantly, disbalance between those two.
Well, I like what you just said. Creating something of substance and meaning implies, at least to me, that you, the artist, are going to go to places that you haven't been to before.
Absolutely.
Because if you keep on visiting the same place, all you're making is decoration.
Indeed.
You know, you need to go, in the way that I see it, you need to go to the unknown. You need to challenge yourself and go to places where what you experience, whether it's spontaneous or the subject of meditation, it's real and it's deep and it challenges you. So you place yourself in a place of discomfort, of awe and terror simultaneously. And that's where images of substance come from. I think not only in photography, but in every medium. And so the thing that hooks the artist, or that hooks me as an artist, is this journey into the unknown, which if you don't back off because of the terrifying nature of it, then the fact that you did it empowers you. I like to say it's like when you face that unknown, it's Black Kali, the goddess of destruction, who could eat you alive because your fears are saying, why am I doing this? Hasn't it been said more eloquently by others? Do I have anything original to say? You have an internal conversation with 1,000 reasons why you should not pursue. And if you can overcome that, Black Kali turns into White Kali, the creatrix of the universe, and all of a sudden, it's like nothing will stop you. It may not be great, you may still go through trials by fire, but you're totally empowered, and you have the chance of making something great. And I think that journey, that artistic journey, that mythological journey that every artist takes into the unknown to acquire new wisdom and bring it back to save his or her people, I think that's what hooks us all to going back again and again and wanting to be real and wanting to make substantial work.
Well, the further we go in this conversation, deeper we dive in mythology. You was talking about Indian gods, and I was thinking about Prometheus, essentially, because that's exactly what you described. You're coming into the place which is inaccessible for the ordinary mind, and coming back with something that humanity never seen before. Which is Prometheus' case was fire. In our case, is the works of art, and your works indeed testament that he was diving very deep into this void.
Thank you. You know, on the one hand, the photographic tools are limited, and yet on the other, the challenge is unlimited. You know, I often think of the Beatles when they made their Sgt. Pepper record. Mm-hmm. They made it using a 4-track tape recorder, which is like a Model T Ford by our standards. Mm-hmm. You know, they did the tracks, the first track on one of them, then they transferred that to another, and they had 3 tracks left, and they continued. And at the end of the day, it wasn't about the quality of the equipment, although having good equipment certainly helps. It was about the quality of the ideas. And that's where everything begins and ends. The idea, and then developing the chops to translate your idea with clarity.
Oh, let's talk about ideas. Your photographs showing often extremely unexpected imagery, and each of the photographs I've seen from this mythological direction, there is another direction we're yet to even discuss. It creates a story that is very open to interpretation. Do you have your own interpretation for them, or you deliberately creating them as something that every person have to basically reinvent for themselves?
Good question, and the answer is yes to everything you just asked. But let me explain why.
Absolutely.
First of all, I am definitely story-driven in my work. So everything that I do with a photograph, whether it is a single shot photograph or a composite, It's all in the service of the story, because I love being a storyteller. And I started as a writer, and then as a composer. And it was always about the ebb and the flow and the crescendo and the dynamism of what it is that you have to say. Simply experimenting was never enough, but everything in the service of the story is how I view the work. So when you look at any of my images, you know, in every corner, in every iota, I think about what's in it or what's not in it, because often what is not included is as important as what is included.
Absolutely.
And I also find that great photographs are as much a reflection of the photographer as it is of the subjects.
Oh, totally understand that.
Going back to your question, I think about the stories, but I also want to imbue my imagery with a sense of mystery and ambiguity. Because I think pictures that raise questions more than they give answers are the ones that compel you and make you come back and say, well, wait a minute, was it this or was it that? And then the imagination of the viewer becomes more involved in viewing, and it becomes a more exciting experience.
Oh, talking about comeback, we will come back after this break and continue this.
Terrific. I'm looking forward.
Hello, this is Alex AG from Single Shot with another single trick. Tonight I want to tell you a little bit about post-production. There is one feature in Photoshop and many other photo editing programs that being used scarcely. That's channels. And there is only one reason why it is so. Nobody understands what it is for. Well, not nobody, but a lot of people don't. So when you see an image just like this, you are getting in channel that. And that's very counterintuitive, because you actually supposed to be seeing this. 3 separate sets of color, not of grayscale. So if you would think of each channel as specific color, for example, of red being red instead of grays, blue being blue instead of grays, and green likewise, you'll find channels very useful for editing. We're back, and we was talking about how viewers perceiving the artwork, and during this break I was actually asking you, what do you think is more important for the artist to see, if the viewer actually gets what you was putting into the artwork and pretty much repeating what you was saying to yourself looking at your art, or discovering something new and something you even didn't see yourself in it? For me, the latter was always more important and more interesting to see in the viewers.
I definitely agree with you on that point. However, I think that if for you, the artist, your vision or your story is not cohesive, then the questions that should arise won't arise, because it's just going to be a kind of a jumble of things. Yes. But at the end of the day, I want mystery. I want sufficient ambiguity so that my viewer says, I can see this, but I can also see that, or I'm not really sure, I have to think about it, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, they're thinking about your work and it's doing its job.
So you believe that the actual thinking process is the most important part of it? There are pretty much 2 approaches to art. One exemplified by, say, Oscar Wilde, the art just for the sake of art. And another one is Aristotle, when the art have to be didactic and have to teach a person how to live their life. So it's every artist in one way or another expects certain impact his or her work is leaving on the viewers. So
I just want to correct one word. I don't know if thinking is the ultimate, but
feeling,
being moved. Yes.
being moved.
If a viewer is moved enough to contemplate something about the work, then I think you've done a good job.
So the contemplation on its own is pretty much the ultimate feedback from the viewer for you. Oh,
For me, the ultimate feedback is doing the work. You know, I think that when you do the work, you take that journey, as I mentioned before, into the unknown. That is the most exciting thing. You know, it's almost like the work is secondary to the transformation that happens to you in the course of the process.
it's actually a very Eastern approach to doing things and to life. It always was said, especially when English culture started to clash with the Chinese culture during the Opium Wars, and this whole process of China being more integrated with European culture. The Chinese was very often complaining that Europeans have actually valuing the results way more than the process, and they just missing the whole journey.
You know, it's like when you see these very often male monks from Tibet who make mandalas in sand, and they spend hours and hours making the most intricate, unbelievable details. They make these gigantic mandalas the size of this table or larger, and when they're done, they kick the sand and they walk away.
And as I understand, you actually seen it in real life, and that brings
It's
us
amazing.
to another body of your work which we didn't discuss yet. So I was talking about this beautiful, mystifying works with scenes that never existed in real life, essentially, even though they composed of parts of what really existed. But the other body of your work, as I understand, is specifically realistic and in a way coming from the direction of reportage photography.
It's true. So I have, I would like to say, two dominant veins of work that I do.
Nice way to put
One
it.
is based on my imagination, and there I use a lot of compositing in order to realize the vision. And even the vision that I want to realize is subject to change and spontaneity, because so many things happen in the moment. If you are stuck with the thing that you wanted to start with and you cannot veer from that, then you are not alive in the moment, and you are not alive to the magic that can happen in the creative process. But not to get too far off. So one way is about the imagination and compositing work in the service of those kinds of stories. The other is dealing with traditional people, with traditions, with what I consider to be vanishing stories. And in that vein, it is also important to tell the story. But I don't want to composite, and I don't want to alter the imagery that I find, because there are so many issues around people who are being marginalized for dozens of reasons, that changing it, altering it, will subject you and your work perhaps to criticism, whether it's fair or unfair. And I think you ultimately detract from the power of simply recording what you can. Of course, you place people in certain positions, you tell them to think about things, but ultimately it's them in their environment. And what I particularly do in those situations, which are single shot situations, I do not use a backdrop. Now, I know many very skilled people who have gone to the same places that I love to go to, vanishing cultures, and they take a big backdrop and they take a beautiful portrait and it's lit. But I want an environmental portrait that is celebrating those subjects and the environment that they live in, because including that is, to me, a much more poignant story about who they are, where they live, the context of where they live. So seeing a remarkable face or body or adornment against a black backdrop can be striking and beautiful. But from my point of view, I want to include a portion of the environment that helps to tell the story. And then it's about, well, what portion of the environment do you include and what portion do you exclude? So to me, it's like poetry. You know, poetry, I think, the power of poetry is in the spaces between the words as much as it is in the words
Absolutely.
themselves. So I love shooting traditional peoples around the world because for me it's an exercise in visual poetry.
Well, since we was talking about the environment, you actually treated in a way probably as seriously as the subject, him or herself. And that actually brings us to a very interesting question. Are you actually specifically choosing the environment and placing the subject in this environment, or you just catching the moment? Is it one or another? Don't get me wrong.
No,
I'm not,
it's between the two.
between the two.
It's between the two. So, you know, I will go to a place, I will encounter people in their environment, and then I'll look around and I'll see, you know, what is there in the moment without, you know, changing anything, but how can I position people to take advantage of what is real and natural, and yet giving a sense of drama and story to the picture.
Yeah, so in a way, it's still a process essentially very similar to what you're doing with your mythological vein of art.
It is.
You are still creating a story, but in this case, you're creating it from the elements that actually exist. It's the story that is within the range of probabilities in this case. These people could have come in that exact place and do exactly what
Yes.
you're asking them to do. It was possible for this to happen on its own.
Absolutely. I'm not taking people and placing them in an artificial environment. And you know, in those situations, you know, when you come, you're a foreigner, you're a Caucasian foreigner who has the financial ability to own a camera, to travel to these places. You're in a very different place from the subjects. I want not only to enhance my understanding of the way that they see the world. So for example, when I shoot with traditional people, it can be hours before I ever take a camera out of the bag, and sometimes I don't ever take it out because I want to have a rapport and I want to discuss, you know, meet people, and ultimately I want to honor them. You know, and very often their own governments don't honor them at all. But I'm there, and I want to do something that I feel is right and important and right for me.
So today in single shot, I'm going to tell you how to make a makeshift pinhole camera. It's actually very simple. All you need is a business card. I'm gonna use mine, but you can use any. You need to apply 2 pieces of duct tape on it, just like this, so they will be overlapping each other. And right in the middle of the cut, from the inside, pierce a small hole. The smaller and rounder it is, the better will be your result. And put this contraption right on the camera, so the hole is right in the middle of the lens space. Then point it at what you would like to take a picture of, put the camera on delay, and take the shot. Voila! You have your pinhole camera shot. Thank you, and watch us on YouTube. Alright, we're back, and we have only a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to use this opportunity to actually ask you a very interesting question. Besides being a photographer, you're actually a visual artist who excelled in virtually every form of visual art known to humankind. And recently, because of many events that was happening in art world, we're questioning the whole understanding of what art is, and I actually wanted to hear your opinion about it. What is art? What is the reason for art? What is the meaning of it?
Now, I think a number of very famous people have written books about this, but since we'll try and condense it into the few moments that we have.
TikTok?
So this is a subjective answer, but for me, art is not a profession, although we have people who are professional artists. Art is a part of the human condition. Art is something we all have the capacity of doing, and whether you're working as a sculptor in a piece of stone, or a photographer, or in some other medium, or if life is the big art for you. The question is, do you live creatively? Do you just walk down the same path as everyone else? Do you take a challenge? Are you willing to change everything? Because what art does, as I see it, is it changes the world for you. It's like philosophy in action. That's why Clement Greenberg, the famous critic during the abstract expressionist movement, he was so excited, and the United States was so excited when this new form of art was happening, because I think if you look at something and it changes your understanding of how things operate, or even how visual things operate, then nothing is the same for you anymore. All of a sudden, the world as you perceive it is different. And art gives us the opportunity to grow and immerse in unexpected ways. It gives us the opportunity to blossom and flower spontaneously, mirroring the way all of nature and creativity occurs. And so to engage in it is really to be engaged in the same work as creation, and to try and say, and to convince yourself that you can't, you're not talented, you're not good enough, or this or that. You cut yourself off from an essential part of the human experience. I think art is as necessary as food for everyone to engage in.
Well, the most important part of what I've just heard was art is philosophy in action. So let's hope that everybody will be engaging in this the most beautiful form of philosophy, and it will continue to bring us the beautiful results, as, for example, works of you, Mark. Thank you
both
very
optimists.
much.
Thank you very much, Alex.
It was
It's really been a
beautiful
pleasure.
conversation. Thank you.
I hope you found that worth watching as much as I did. I'm Mark for Roundtable. Thanks for watching. See you next week.